Hi everybody, my name is Bradley King and this is my final project for MIS 665. I enjoyed spending the time to just recap and go over all the modules that we learned this semester and just put it into practice. So I just want to say thank you for a great semester despite COVID 2020. It's been a little different than ideal, but I was able to learn so much and I'm excited to apply this in my future career and in future courses as well. So I hope you enjoy this slideshow and see the hard work that I put in. And without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. This is my second take. I know I recorded too long the first time, so I want to try to condense this and go a lot quicker. So once again, here we go. Project goal. We are a part of a finance company, and we want to understand loans and why they cancel before maturity date and end up building a model to understand that and predict that loan cancellation. So we load up the data, we got into the info, got into all that. We did some basic visualization, looking at a histogram, just kind of see what we're working with. We saw some basic observations and before we were able to dig really into the data. And a quick side note, if you're curious about anything else that I have in my Jupyter notebook, there's a lot I didn't include in these slides, even though there are a lot of slides. Feel free to consult or refer to my Jupyter notebook at any time. So data processing, I want to see how many rows we had, and then I want to see what null values we were working with. That allowed me to drop 7 columns that I deemed unworthy or unimportant of my analysis. So that was really centered around the values that had over 100,000 missing values and such. Then I did an aesthetic change. I liked lowercase, and so that allowed me to easily input variables, create dummy variables, drop values, things of that sort going into the future analysis and model building. And then after we got the columns dropped, then we were able to replace the rest of the NA values with median, which was a safe guess. Next up, that left us with borrower credit score as the last value with missing values in this data transformation process. I wanted to keep it because I think it's a good idea to look into this later. So I replaced it with a no score credit score. That was gonna, in turn, that didn't affect any other group in the credit score, so I didn't want to influence, say group number 2 and give them more values, and skew the data. So I thought it was a safe bet putting it in no score. Next up, business intelligence. We had a lot to look at here. I'm not going to cover every single one, but I am going to touch on a couple. This one is, cancellation borrow ID. We're able to see that a different range here, 3.08 to 3.12. Even 3.14 has a higher just rate of cancellations than the previous range. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not sure if they're in their system, the ID is referred to like, newer customers, something of that sort, but I'm sure they can interpret this and see that, these later ranged users are more likely to cancel. And then we were able to look into credit score. Like I said, I like that variable. And we can see, it's pretty even across the board. However, in group 5, the worst credit scores, there's less people in that group than the 2, 3, and 1 group. But in proportion, they do have more cancellations than any other group, basically. And then lastly, payments received. We can see, in the beginning of the phase where the first few payments are coming in, that's where more cancellations happen. It makes sense. If you make it far into the process, then you're probably good to go. Then we got a cat plot here to kind of just show there as a connection with agents and whatnot. Just a couple cool things we were able to do, just in the business intelligence section. We were able to see, cancellation by loan length. Like I said, this allowed us to see, that a loan term size, about 10 months was the most commonly canceled, followed by 9. Just common canceled loans. And then this is the APR, common rates of that. The most commonly canceled APR was 15.95. Then we could see, these are the most common. I want to see on the other, on the flip side, I wanted to see which were the most common APR rates of loans not canceled. And then we wanted to look at default charge and cancellation since it was identified as an interesting variable to look at. There's a slight correlation and change. And then we can look at the state breakdown. I wanted to get a little pivot table action. I wanted to see, just a breakdown of the counts for each state. And we can see, Texas got a lot of people, and they're taking out loans. So that prompted me, after you see here, this shows that Texas, I believe Louisiana, Mississippi, I believe those are the 3. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm going on a whim here, but I think those are the states that had the most loan cancellations. However, if we look at the next plot, I decided to plot. You can see that those 2 states, though, had the most occurrences overall anyway, so it was not as valuable of information. So I took it upon myself to create a new variable, cancel probability, in which I was able to break it down state by state, the probability that someone cancels within that state. So I thought this was really cool and more insightful. One of the things I just really wanted to explore within business intelligence, and I'm happy that I was able to do it. So we got North Dakota, South Dakota, and Idaho as the 3 highest states likely to cancel based on probability. So we want to look at some more correlation and exploratory data analysis. We got a heat map here, helped me to make a lot of connections within the data, identify some strong correlations. And then we head over to some hypothesis testing where, once again, we looked at correlations to identify certain variables and then come up with questions like, is there a statistically significant difference between loans canceled and those that are not in terms of payments received? So the p-value here is 0, so it indicates it is a significant difference between loans canceled and those not canceled in terms of amount of payments received. That was kind of something we explored earlier with the visualization. Is there a difference between loans canceled and those not in terms of borrower ID? That's what I talked about a little bit with the visualization as well. And the p-value, shows that with the E minus 271, that's very close to 0. That is very significant as well. So then we went into our model and deployment section here. Started with classification. I'm not going to show much of this, but we did create dummy variables. Once again, if you're interested in any of that, the Jupyter Notebook is going to have all your answers there. And then we're going to look at decision tree as the first form of classification. We created an X variable, Y variable, and then we split validation, tested the decision tree model, and here's our results with a 95.5% accuracy and a 0.79 area under curve score as well. So that is going to prove to be our best model. In fact, I'm just going to tell you now, that was our best model in accuracy. Random forest, here it is, 95.12, just off the mark by a little bit. Random forest model shows that amount of accuracy. And then we got KNN, which is K-neighbors classifier, and we able to get a 93.6% accuracy with an area underscore 0.5. Logistic regression, there it is again. There's our score, 93.9 and 0.5 area underscore as well. So that showed that our best classification model was decision tree. Regression, we were able to do another heat map just so I can get a refresher on some of the correlations and identify, because this was regression with premiums and we wanted to look at exposure, fin change, and down payment. So we'll use the 3 variables in our regression model, and once again we assigned it, we tested it, we got our coefficients, and this was something that kind of came out of it. We can see there's a huge importance on a fin change, which is I believe something with interest. But there's a lot going on here with this equation, and once we tested that model, we saw that the R squared was a 95.4. So very, very valid model. And then we're going to look at some model selection, which is basically assigning X and Y variables. Once again, doing a K-means, K-fit, going through all of that. And basically it shows, index 678 here after we tested the model, identified which variables were most influential. And as we can see, it was payments received, borrower ID, and borrower credit score of 5. And we tested that model, not very good. That was actually our worst model we developed, so we won't select that one to rely on going forward. Lastly, we did some clustering. We normalized the data. We generated the clusters. We fit it. Then we did into the clusters and centroids themselves. Then we added the cluster label into the data set. We joined the tables. We did the cluster size. I just wanted to get an idea of how many people were in each cluster, and that was as displayed here on the screen. And then we're going to look at the means. This helped me just characterize the clusters a little bit more, and we saw the biggest differences really did revolve around prices, monetary values, premiums, down payments, late charges. All these things were really what separated each cluster from another, and there's a little visualization to show the density differences. And then lastly, there's a K elbow optimal method as well that we could explore at the end as well. So final analysis and storytelling are key takeaways. When we look at who's canceling, according to our research, as touched on earlier, 3.08 to 3.12 range is a more frequent canceller for user ID. A lot of people have good credit scores, but those with worse credit scores are more likely to cancel, which makes sense. Magic number is 8. If you can get a client past 8 payments received, you're pretty much guaranteed to get the rest of that loan and not have it canceled. South Dakota, North Dakota, and Idaho have the highest probability of canceling as well. Variables, we can look at that premium from the regression model earlier. We saw the different monetary values that are highly correlated with it, and with a 95% accurate regression model. Some of the best variables to explore also include higher cancellation of states, payments received, default charge, borrower ID. Some of those should be mentioned as well. And lastly, some models and factors that we looked at earlier. Once again, the decision tree model was the best model created in terms of accuracy and area under curve, and that's what I recommend for sure. Overall, I think this analysis and models provided will help the company detect clients that are likely to cancel before we even issue a loan. So if we're dealing with high-risk clients, our model provided can accurately predict those clients 95.5% of the time. And then we'll be able to cancel or just keep those people off our system, or not give them a loan, or not issue it at all. So the models will be handy in saving money for sure, time, resources. It will provide not only saving money, but it'll also provide the employees that work for us a better understanding of the who and the why people cancel their loans. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to a great rest of the year.